I would say pretty much I had to rise up to my humanity in a lot of ways, because the year began here in America where we had a new president coming in. We weren't exactly sure what was going to happen, how he would actually manage the White House, how he would try to lead the country. And within 1 month, unfortunately for my community, I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and particularly the transgender community, President Trump decided to rescind the Obama guidance regarding school children who are transgender and protecting them around the country. And so immediately I was put into a position of having to help protect 200,000 transgender school children in our country, and at the same time oppose the administration and the president from my own party, the Republican Party. So from that very moment, I knew that this year was going to be a year where I had to rise to the occasion. I needed to make some decisions on how I was going to either be a leader or be a follower. And I feel in this course of the year, I had to really search in myself for what kind of person I wanted to be and what kind of effective change I could make in the greater world.
That moment you mentioned, Trump changing an Obama-era policy, came on the eve of a national conservative conference, an annual conference, CPAC. How did you walk in there and face those people?
I'll be frank with you. I had every intention of going to CPAC for a long time because I wanted people to know that there are folks who are conservative, that are Republican, who happen to be transgender. The year previous to this, I had gone to CPAC authentically as myself. I had had to reintroduce myself to a good number of people. It went very, very well for me. But not knowing before that morning I turned on the news to find out that the Obama guidance was rescinded, and specifically focusing on transgender children, it was difficult. I actually turned some music on to help inspire myself. I listened to U2's Joshua Tree album. And what I kind of thought of is, you know what? I have been put in this place for a reason. There's a reason I was in Washington, D.C. to go to the Conservative Political Action Conference. There's a reason I'm transgender. There's a way that I can hopefully start bridging the gap between the LGBTQ community and the conservative side. Because too many people in our country, particularly in conservative America, have never met an LGBT person, let alone someone who's transgender. And to be that person that's standing across from them discussing issues like taxes, our economy, national defense, defeating ISIS, that would be something where I could talk their language, we could connect, and then I could say, excuse me 1 second, I'd like to share with you that I'm transgender. And this is why these laws, or this is why the president's proposal to get rid of the guidances are really not a good thing for the transgender community, for our school children, and are not a good thing for America, because we all should have access to the liberties and freedoms and equality that everyone else has. And unless I was there, and fortunately I was there with another transgender Republican female, we would not have had someone be able to be spokespeople and engage folks one-on-one. And I'll just share one real quick conversation I had was with 2 Marines. And if you say on a piece of paper, a transgender woman at CPAC talking to 2 Marines, that may not go well. It actually went great. They were supportive. They did have a lot of questions. One of them ended up being on a school board in a state. And I was able to be there to answer them one-on-one and demystify our community. And I'm really glad I did it.
Well, President Trump also reversed Obama guidelines on transgender people serving in the military. How did that make you feel?
I was furious. The idea that transgender Americans could not serve in the military, I know firsthand, because I know transgender people who do serve in the military and serve very, very well. Kristen Beck, who is a Navy SEAL. I know people who can serve currently. I have a friend who's an Army medic and served in Afghanistan and Iraq. I know that we can do it. I am sure that once America gets used to the idea that we are in the military, we've been in all kinds of positions. The studies have been done. The RAND Corporation has an excellent study that having us in the military would not affect performance, it would not affect readiness, and the cost of us being in the military is so ridiculously low. It's the same as providing Viagra to retirees. But the idea that someone who's transgender can't do a job running from being a drone operator in Nebraska to flying F-18s to serving on board ships. We can do the job just as anyone else. But when the president did those tweets, it hurt. It felt like someone took a 2x4 and hit me with it, because I was in my car. I just dropped off my children to summer camp and I was driving to work, and to hear breaking news on a radio station announcing this, and it wasn't even he gave a speech. It wasn't that he sat in the Oval Office or that he wrote this out as a directive to be released to the public. He tweeted it. It's insulting, quite frankly. And for him to make a spur-of-the-moment decision like that, which had no basis, that he didn't consult with the Pentagon, he didn't consult with General Mattis, he didn't consult with a lot of people. As a transgender American, I felt less of American that day. I really did. But what I thought would happen did happen, which is we've risen to the occasion. We have fought back on it. We've introduced ourselves to more of the American public and the world. And many, many people got to know that there were at least 7,500 transgender people already serving in harm's way, whether that's in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, anywhere else overseas. We're already there and we're in your life, and you're working with us. You already know this. You already know that we can do the job. But I think what the president and ultimately is going to have done our community is a great service, because of his folly of doing this, more of America is going to embrace and accept transgender people than would have taken years to do otherwise.
Now, obviously, you've gone through your own personal transition as a transgender woman, but the transgender community has also gone through its own transition over the years, arguably having made some significant progress in terms of visibility. Was 2017 a setback?
In some ways it has, for sure, because we know right now we're in year one of a current administration that unfortunately is adhering to a policy set that is wanted by a lot of folks who are on the social conservative bent. And it's one of the things as Republicans, as folks who are fiscally conservative, socially moderate, what have you, we need to realize that they don't control our party. And we need to rise to the occasion and decide that, no, we believe that liberty and freedom is deserved by all and should be guaranteed for all. And for the transgender community, we need to realize that we have a lot of allies in a lot of places we didn't expect. And we've had things such as what happened in Texas this past year with SB2, SB3. We've had other issues with the military ban, the rescinding of the guidance, the Justice Department's decision to fight back in lawsuits that would protect the greater LGBT community. We have really had some setbacks, but I think ultimately 2017, as Winston Churchill would say, it's not the beginning of the end, it's the end of the beginning. We have realized, I think, as a community that we have more parts to us than there is a whole. Oh, sorry, more whole than there is the parts. And I think as a community, while yes, we've been pushed back, we've had some problems, I think we've also have some opportunities, because if the administration is pushing back on our community and creating scenarios where we may be discriminated against in medical care, in housing, in employment, we have developed arguments, we've developed strategies that can reach out to the greater American public and ultimately defeat those policies. And what I'm hoping as a transgender person living in America is that we realize that we've been given these difficulties, these obstacles, these setbacks, but we can decide to make these into opportunities. No one can stop us from doing that, and I think if we do so, we're going to win.
I wonder, is the conversation about your gender identity just a distraction from the conversation that really needs to be happening about violence against transgender people, homelessness, poverty, unemployment? How do you shift the conversation in that direction among Republicans?
I think we're starting to. I know in my own case, I've been lobbying on Capitol Hill for roughly about 16, 18 months now, and conversations I wasn't able to have a year or so ago, I'm being able to have now. Running from the homelessness and LGBTQ community, because 40% of homeless youth in America are LGBTQ, to medical care discrimination that can still happen in our country, employment discrimination, housing discrimination. We've seen great things like Scott Taylor, who's a congressman from Virginia Beach, former Navy SEAL. He has sponsored the Fair and Equal Housing Act, and it has a great number of Republican co-sponsors to it, and I'm really hopeful in 2018 we'll see a bill like that pass. Thank you. And I'm hoping that's a start, because if we can make that argument that people should not be discriminated against in housing, then its next move is, okay, what about employment? What about medical care? So if someone is in a car accident, they can't be left on the side of the road. They have to be attended to. And these are all issues, but it has to be done by introduction. And there are more Republicans, I find, that are willing to have the conversation with you, and I legitimately want to learn, but we've let them become afraid. By not being in the room, by not talking to them as a LGBTQ community, we've let those who do not like us, maybe some of those that do hate us, control the discussion, and we no longer can do that.
What do you say to the critics who would ask, why do you fight so hard to defend the party that wouldn't necessarily fight to defend you?
Well, I don't necessarily say that I defend the party. There are a lot of policies I do agree with. Ronald Reagan famously said that my 80% friend isn't my 20% enemy. And I may be fighting a lot of folks in the party on the 20%. But what I've found by going to Conservative Political Action Conference 9 times, this coming year will be my 10th, and by being active in the party, I went to the Republican National Convention last year as the only openly trans person to have those discussions, is this: not everyone believes in a party platform against LGBT people. Not everyone wants to support policies or even verbalize policies that discriminate against anyone. Nobody wants to be in the party of discrimination. But what has happened is we've let our party, the control of it, the apparatus, be taken by people who, yeah, they do not want to see liberty and freedom for LGBTQ people. But they only get that power if we give it to them. So while I don't defend the entirety of my party, I know in my heart, I know where I come from in New Jersey, not one person I've ever met has ever exhibited any animus, any hatred towards our community, and have never expressed they don't want to see us do well. I just recently became the chairwoman of the Trenton Republican Party Committee in Trenton, New Jersey. The chances of that happening before a couple years ago probably never would have happened. But the way I see it is, there are enough people who see what's going on in Washington, what's going on with some of the social conservatism. That's not me. That's not why I became a Republican, whether it's from Abe Lincoln or Ronald Reagan or whoever. That's not the party I joined first. But what I need to do is make the party back to what it originally was, not what it is today. And I think we can do that.
And yet, some of the most horrible things being said about transgender people at the moment are coming from Republicans. How do you change that?
What we have to do is get inside those spaces and talk to those people or talk to their staffs and be present to tell them, this is what you said, this is why you're wrong. I've done that myself. I've gone to Capitol Hill, I've gone into some of those offices where we've had, unfortunately, members who've said some of the worst things. People can easily find them on the internet. And it's quite interesting when you sit with a staffer and you remind them of the comments that were made, and then you say, well, excuse me, I'm actually transgender and I'm a fellow Republican. So can you explain to me why the congressman said X or why the congressman said Y? And that's the first time they've ever met a transgender person, and they're realizing in their mind, we got to work on this. And I've had those conversations. But what's interesting is even after the Pulse attack, we had some very, very conservative Republican congressmen, particularly one who even said that this was an attack on the LGBT community. Whereas we had other politicians from across the political spectrum not say that. So to me, that says there's some conflict there. If we're in that space and we talk to them, we might be able to change the hearts and minds, and it's worth the effort. I get a lot of criticism from people who say, you're wasting your time. Why do you talk to them? You should just say nasty things to them. No. As someone of Irish descent who's been to Northern Ireland, I've seen that invisible line, which is religion, keep people apart, and that happens all over the world. If we let that happen here and we don't try to engage people and meet one-on-one and talk, we're never going to solve our problems, and we're never going to move to a place where we can coexist. And we have to do that.
You quoted Winston Churchill as saying, it's not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning. So what does 2018 look like for you and for your community?
It looks like a very busy year. We have to reintroduce ourselves. We have to introduce ourselves to members of the greater American community we haven't done in the past. We have to step out of our comfort zones. We have to go particularly into Republican spaces, talk to voters that we maybe have never talked to before. And I'm speaking to as my Democratic brothers and sisters. If we don't do that, we can't turn 2017, which was a very difficult year, into a 2018, which is a triumphant year. And I'm not saying politically whether the Democratic Party wins a lot of seats or my party, Republican Party, wins a lot of seats, hopefully with people who are better on LGBT issues. But 2018 looks to be a major challenge. But we have to rise to the occasion, because if we don't get out there, knock on doors, introduce ourselves to our social clubs in our cities, get involved in a community, whether it's volunteering. I try to encourage people to join even politically. Try to become a committee member. Make sure you volunteer for whatever event might come up, because if people know you as a person, when they find out you're transgender, they're way more likely to support you and stand by you. Harvey Milk famously said to the community to make sure you come out to everyone you can, because they are less likely to vote against you. We have to start doing that again, particularly for my transgender community, because we are the community that has so many myths out there. If we don't stand up, if we don't become our own best advocates, we're not going to change the game, and we have to change the game in 2018.